Hello and welcome to this video blog post. In my previous post, I talked about the benefits of combining infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, and I talked about some scenarios. And in this post, I'm going to show you some examples of those ideas that I had listed in my previous blog, and some of the scenarios that I talked about in that blog post were about extending the data center to the cloud, ability to manage cloud and on-premise resources using a single glass or a single tool, and then of course ability to combine the benefits of IaaS and PaaS side by side. So I'm going to show you some quick examples of these ideas in action. So this is our first scenario, and we are going to use the Windows Azure Virtual Network to essentially create a virtual branch office. So what you see in the diagram is an on-premise data center. Corp HQ has a bunch of servers, has the Active Directory domain DNS server, and we're going to use one of the approved devices approved by the Windows Azure IaaS offering to connect this data center out to the cloud. And once this connection has been established, I'll show you through the portal that we can assign it an IP address range. In fact, break up that range for the machines in the cloud into various subnets. And just so we can understand the demo better, take a look at the IP addresses. So in my data center, I have machines. In fact, I have the AD server here, which has this IP address shown here on the page. And then I have an IP address range that I have assigned to my Windows Azure based machines. So let's go ahead and take a look at the portal and how this virtual network was set up. And then next, we will RDP into one of these machines. So we are in the Windows Azure portal. Let's go over to the network tab, and we see a bunch of virtual networks that have been provisioned. I'll go into this virtual network because this mimics the PowerPoint slide that I showed you earlier. Let's go down into this. And I've used a convention. OP stands for the on-premise data center. And this is the data center in Windows Azure, and it is further broken up into a number of subnets. And if I scroll further down here, you will see a bunch of machines. These are the machines that are part of the virtual network, and you can see their IP addresses. And as you can see, the web front end has an IP address range of 10.0.2 because this falls in the presentation subnet that we defined earlier. Let's go into the configuration tab. This is the backend and presentation subnet. I already talked about this. Windows Azure provides a DNS server, so we don't really need this one here. The local connectivity option and the key, which is then used to set up the VPN. Okay, let's go over to the virtual machine tab now. And here are all the machines. Let's just drill into the web front end. And you'll notice here that the IP address belongs to the subnet, since this machine was assigned to the presentation subnet. Okay, so we have this machine here. Let's go back to the Active Directory controller here, and I'm going to RDP into this box here. And while this comes up, just log into this box. And remember that we are logging into a Windows Azure IaaS machine, which is serving as the Active Directory domain controller. And if I bring up the management console, and let me just do this here. If I bring up, let me move this aside. If I bring up the Active Directory sites management console, you will notice here that I have two sites that are defined. I have the Azure Data Center, and it has its own AD server. And then I also have the on-premise data center with its own AD server here. Okay, and I can even bring up the DNS server, and you can see all the machines are listed here. AZ are all the machines that are in Azure, and OP, as I said earlier, are all the machines on premises. And I can, in fact, now map a drive to a machine. So let me just go ahead and do this again so you can see it. So we are inside the Windows Azure Data Center, and because the VPN is up and running, we are able to browse to the machines which are in our data center, and in fact very easily map a drive to it. So I'm going to map a drive to and since it has the credentials, since I tried it earlier, it was able to just quickly get it. So I'm able to map a drive to an on-premise machine, and keep in mind we are, and pay attention at the top of the screen here, we are inside the Windows Azure Data Center. So as you can see from this slide and this quick demonstration, that we were able to set up a VPN tunnel. We remote desktop into an Azure machine, and by virtue of the VPN tunnel, we were able to map a drive to a machine that was located within our data center. Okay, let's very quickly look at the next scenario. And the next scenario is about managing on-premises and Windows Azure based resources through a single tool. And what you see here on the slide is one of the views of the System Center 2012, which shows you your production and staging deployments. And in addition to that, one benefit of using System Center is that you get granular access to your subscriptions. We all know that we can go to the portal, upload a certificate, and then get access to the portal in that manner, but you don't have the granular access to these subscriptions. Once you do that through System Center, you can say that these members have access to production, or these members have access to staging. So that's a nice benefit as well. So before we look at a demo of the System Center, I would just like to clarify one thing, and hopefully that'll make the demo easier to understand. And let me in fact go back to my previous slide here, and let me point out one quick thing here. In my previous demonstration, I RDP'd into this box right here. Okay, and what we are going to do next is going to go back to this box. Okay, but keep in mind that System Center is running on premises. So to be able to view the System Center capabilities, we need to go back to this box here. So the easiest way for me to do that, based on where I am today, I'm going to RDP into Azure, and then from the RDP session within Azure, I'm going to open up another RDP session to this box here where I have the System Center installed. So keep that in mind. We have two levels of RDP going on here, but hopefully you can follow along. So let me go back to the Windows Azure portal here. Okay, so let's go back here to our RDP connection. So here we are in the RDP session. And then I'm going to open up the RDP session back to the on-prem System Center machine. Let me go ahead and do that. And let me bring up the System Center view, the Operations Manager view. And notice here that it is showing me a bunch of machines, and it is showing me an on-premise machine that's being monitored. It is also showing me Azure machine, the web front end, the SQL boxes, and telling me if they're healthy or not. I can also bring up a diagram view of my system. So, this is telling me that you're running under the IaaS betas domain. These machines are healthy, these are not, and then I can further drill down into these machines. Okay, and the last thing I wanted to show you here is I can also have a performance view where I have performance data that's being collected across Azure machines, on-premise machines, all available within a single screen. So as you can see from this demonstration, we have agents installed, System Center agents installed on all of the Azure virtual machines. And then we have the System Center running on premises, which is collecting data. And all of this traffic is going over the VPN that we set up and we looked at earlier in this presentation. The last and final scenario that I want to talk about is having IaaS and PaaS side by side. So in this case, I have an MVC application which is hosted inside an Azure web role. So I get the benefits of platform as a service. I don't have to deal with virtual machines myself. And so all my MVC code is hosted in a web role. But then the MVC application is dependent on a SQL Server instance that is running on premises. And there could be many reasons I want to do that. This is sensitive data that I want to double down on, and I have a very high-end SQL Server setup that I've invested a lot of money in, and it is running on premises, and I want my web applications to use the virtual network and the tunnel that has been created to use it to access the data from an on-premise resource. And typically, to get around the latency issues, you would want to cache some data. But in order to keep this example simple, I just have a web role where we have an MVC application, and then over the VPN tunnel, that web application is talking to a SQL database running on premises. So let's go ahead and take a look at that demo here. The first thing I'm going to do is bring up that PaaS site, and here's the site, and probably see up at the top. It's a cloudapp.net site. It's a very simple site. It is showing you some names and phone numbers. And in fact, these are some of my colleagues who've worked on this application. Haran, in particular, worked on this piece, and Jack O'Connell worked on many of the infrastructure things. So I'm leveraging the work that they have done and demonstrating you these scenarios. So this is the website, MVC-based website. It is pulling data from SQL Server, which is running on premises. And if I go back to my RDP connection here, and here is my SQL Server instance, and notice up at the top of the RDP session. In fact, let me move, since we are into two levels of our remote desktop sessions, let me move the Azure desktop session to the side, and notice here that the SQL Server is running on-prem. See the machine name up at the top, which is on-prem, and I have the SQL Server Management Studio open. I can make a change to this page just to prove to you that this is indeed connecting back to on-premises SQL Server database. Let me just go ahead and save it. And if I went back to my Azure web role and refresh this, you will see that this data, once this page completes refreshing, you will see that this phone number changes to 5, the change that we just made. And to understand how this is working, let's go back to our Azure portal here for a second, and let's go back to the virtual network tab. And if I look at the IaaS and data center network, and remember I talked about all the machines that are part of this virtual network. In addition to that, there's another machine that is part of the virtual network. In this case, it just happens to be a web role. Okay, so it is not an IaaS machine, but a web role. And as this machine is booted up as part of the startup task, this machine gets authenticated by the local AD instance. Remember, we talked about a read-only replica of the AD running in Windows Azure, and as part of the startup task, this machine is authenticating against the local AD. And then over the virtual tunnel, it is via a connection string, it is going and routing these packets back to on-premise, to the SQL server running on-premise and back. So the thing to take away from this demonstration is this sort of scenario allows you to take advantage of best of both worlds without having to worry about virtual machines or patching. You can use Azure websites, or if you have a more advanced scenario where websites is not supported, you're installing some third-party components, or you are trying to run something in an admin mode or a privilege mode, which Azure websites will not support because of multi-tenant nature. Then you're running it in web role. But either ways, you can take advantage of platform as a service for that capability. And then you can combine it with some on-prem resources. So you're essentially taking advantage of both these scenarios. So hope you found these scenarios helpful. And if you have any questions, please leave comments underneath the blog post, and we'll be happy to respond to you. Thank you.